Hey, good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CD's Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I have got a whole bunch of stuff to go over today. Obviously, from the title of the video, today is the 6-year anniversary of me going full-time as a reseller. There's some applause. We'll talk about that and kind of my just overall thoughts on having gone full time and whether I would do it again and kind of some of the ups and downs that I've gone through with that. I do have some reselling news that I want to cover as well. I'm going to start with a reminder and kind of a recap. If you've been playing along over the last couple of months, I was riding in the Great Cycle Challenge in the month of September to raise money for the Children's Cancer Research Fund. Yesterday was the last day of the rides, and I had initially pledged to do 300 miles because of folks like you generously donating. I gradually increased that all the way up to 500 miles. I did ultimately finish with 576.2 miles in the month of September. Raised so far just around $2,850. I have a goal of $3,000. They are still accepting donations, so the QR code there on your screen or the link in the show notes and the video description down below. If you haven't contributed and would like to reward me for all that hard work, I would massively appreciate it. 576 miles was the most I've ever ridden in a month, going clear back to when I was cycling a ton, kind of in the early 2010s. So it was a very busy month. I'm ready for a little bit of a break from being on the bike. But it was really, really good. Total, so far, they've raised about $6.8 million. So it was a really, really great fundraiser for them. So thank you again to everybody who contributed or supported me through that, through messages and kind words and sharing my posts about it. It was really, really terrific. Let's get here into the chat real quick and say some good mornings. Callie Debs, good morning. Ryan and chat, hope everybody is doing well and getting lots of sales. Hopefully things have started to turn around a little bit. Miss Lachey Resells, hello and good morning. Playroom, welcome. Media Picker, good morning and welcome to Q4. Yes, today is the official first day of Q4. Den Decor Depot, good morning. Maybe at some point, love to hear the rock story of the Galaxy CD's Rocks and Flips name. So I've told this before, but when I opened my eBay store back in 2000, my little CD store here in Hamilton was called Galaxy CDs. And I went to sign up for eBay to start trying to sell maybe some used CDs on there. And for whatever reason, at that point, it would not let me use the name Galaxy CDs. And I had a lot of kids hanging out in the store, and they would always say, you know, oh, this place rocks. So Galaxy CDs Rocks just became kind of the name. That's what I used on my eBay store. And I just kind of stuck with that throughout history. So, and the end Flips, of course, is that now I'm 6 years a full-time reseller as well. So there you go. September was horrible, says Den Decor Depot. October starting very nice. Good first day, I take it. Lord Jake Ryan, good morning. Miss Lachey, thank you for the happy anniversary. Nice work on the writing. Thank you very much. It was good. The longest ride I did, I think, was 40 some miles. So it was a lot of short 20 and 30 mile type stuff. Anything more than 40 or 50 miles is a little more time than I want to spend on the bike in one setting. But Mary McQueen, welcome. Michelle, thank you for coming by. Big Dre, welcome. Mary McQueen, happy Q4. Today starts Q1 at the day gig. There you go. So I have to keep it straight. Yeah, different. It's interesting how different companies have different fiscal years, and their calendars based on their businesses are all different. So really interesting. Mary, thank you for following along. I appreciate it. I did post a lot of videos over on my other YouTube channel about that as well. Some long, some short. So it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. So let's get into this little conversation about 6 years as a reseller, as a full-time reseller. So I've told the story before that August of 2019, sitting in the car dealership where I was working, looking out the window at a beautiful day and deciding I needed to do something different with my life. I couldn't see myself doing that the next, whatever, 15 years and spending, good sunny days working, as it were, I guess. So I fell down the YouTube rabbit hole of reselling, and within a few weeks decided I was just going to jump in and go full time. Gave my 30 days notice at the car dealership on September 1st, and on October 1st of 2019, I officially became a full-time reseller. And it has been, obviously there are ups and downs. There are times where business is not as good as you would like it. There are times where business is almost too good for a one-person operation. It is simultaneously a super flexible schedule and never-ending texts and notifications and interruptions. So there are good and bad parts of it. But on balance, it has been really, really good across, I don't know, over the 6 years, half a dozen or 7 different platforms. I've sold over 30,000 individual items, totaling a little over $500,000 in that time. So it has, while I'm not by any stretch of the imagination getting rich, it's been a profitable venture for me. It's allowed me to live the kind of life that I want to live. And would I do it again? Absolutely. Would I recommend it necessarily to everyone? I don't know that I would. It's something we've talked about and had conversations in lives before. There is a certain amount of psychological pressure and turning like a hobby or something that you really like into a job. It doesn't always work out real well either. I talked about, with my record store, I'm a lifelong music fan. It was a big passion for me. And at some point, after having turned it into a business and relying on it for my income, it changed my perspective on it. It made it less fun and a little more stressful. So it's not necessarily something that I could recommend wholeheartedly to everybody. You have to know your own tolerance for risk. Your family situation may be different. It's me and Salsa, my dog, at this point. So I'm not putting a kid through college or doing any of that kind of stuff. So, every situation is a little bit different. It can be a very lucrative, very profitable business to be in. For me, as I've talked about previously, it was more about having the freedom of my schedule. For instance, yesterday, at 11 o'clock in the morning, I wanted to get my last ride for the previously mentioned Great Cycle Challenge in. So I just stopped working, went out, hopped on the bike and did a quick 20 miles to finish up my rides. That's not something you'd be able to do if you're working full time somewhere else. So that kind of day-to-day flexibility was, kind of to go back to my original point, at the car dealership, that's what I wanted for my life. At the time, I was in my mid-50s. I'm about to turn 60 this month. And I realized that my time was more important to me than the money or the status of a career. And I walked away from, retail management. I walked away from the car dealership. I walked away from the traditional workforce in order to get that for myself at the potential sacrifice of a nice steady income. That, again, this can be real up and down. Not every week can be your best week ever. Some weeks, some months, as someone just said in the chat a moment ago, September was not good for some folks. But overall, for me, it has absolutely allowed me to achieve the original goals that I set out for when I decided to make that move. And if I could go back and do it again, I absolutely would. 6 years on, when I left the car dealership, there were people that told me, it's never going to work. We'll see you back here in 6 months. And here I am, 6 years later, still working in my basement, but doing the kind of thing that I want to do, doing something I enjoy, and being able to do it at the pace and the timing pretty much of my choosing. The only real downside for me, probably, insurance is obviously crazy expensive. And if you're trying to do that for a family, it's obviously something you need to think about. And it's a little difficult to break away for a week-long kind of vacation when, again, being a one-man operation. And there are times I look at my quote unquote death pile, my stack of books in my garage, and think, man, I've got a lot of stuff left to do. But overall, it's really been fantastic. Again, my only cautionary things would be if you wanted to look at it, what your personal aversion to risk is, the consistency of not having, or the inconsistency of not having a consistent paycheck, and being disciplined enough to manage your time to get the work done that you need to get done. Back here into the chat, Mary says that is the most important part. You can live the life you want to live while supporting yourself. Yes. And, again, we talk about it all the time, different business models. I was watching somebody else's YouTube today where they were talking about some sellers only list 2 or 3 items a week, and they're really high value items, and they're making killer money doing that. There are others like me who have burned through over the course of 6 years 30,000 items, and made maybe an average of $17 an item on that. So I'm processing a lot more transactions than other folks, but that was a decision that I made based on return on investment and the availability and good cost of goods sold of the items that I decided I wanted to sell. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, and I do believe anybody could do it if you were willing to, be disciplined, put in the time and effort, and if you can live with the inconsistency sometimes of the money. Beard King Picker, welcome. Thanks for coming out. Den Decor says February 6, 2026 will be his 3rd year full time. Saw the writing on the wall at my day job and was hoping to get a few more months out of it. Got thrown into the fire right away. And sometimes that's, that was kind of the decision that I made. I could have gone on a long time, dabbling in it kind of on the side, continuing to do auto sales, though that's hard to do because the hours in car sales can be ridiculous. That's pre-COVID, of course. Some of that's changed a little bit since that all took place. But I just decided for me, the best way was kind of sink or swim. I've talked about previously, I was in a position financially where I felt like I could go quite some time sinking rather than swimming, and not get myself in too much trouble. So I was in a better position to kind of dive in full time and really focus all my attention on it. But yeah, that can be a great way to learn because you got to get it done. Big Dre says, Kevin O'Leary recently said in an interview that he believes only about 1/3 of the population is capable of being an entrepreneur, and the big reason is many are not willing to take the risk. Absolutely. I think I've told this story before on this show, but I was in, again, to go back to the car dealership, I'd been there for a short while, 6 months or so, and they put a guy in the cubicle right next to me whose background was very similar to mine. Former retail management, operations manager, really nice personality, friendly, outgoing, should have been a carbon copy of me as a successful car salesperson. But he could not get past the fact that he was not going to earn a consistent paycheck. If he didn't sell a car in a day or two, he would get into his own head. He would start freaking out. And you can't do that. If you're that nervous about not making the money, that shows in your presentation. When you're working with customers, you start to press, you try to cut corners. And within 3 months, he was back in our parts department because he just couldn't do it as a salesperson. And we were almost the same person, the same background, the same personality traits, except for that one thing. And that is a big detriment. And you need to know that about yourself. You think about opening your own business, be it reselling or otherwise, getting into commission sales, doing something that it was going to require you to be willing to accept, getting out of it what you put into it, as it were, and not being able to count on, a consistent, it's going to be X amount of dollars in my paycheck this week, next week, and the following week. It ends up obviously it can be stressful. Not every week is great, but on balance, the best way to make the most money probably is to work for yourself and maximize your own opportunity. Mary McQuain says, I love him, and that sounds about right. Miss Lachey says, it takes a lot to do this full time, especially being the only household income. So kudos to anyone making it happen. Absolutely. And as I said, everybody's situation is different. If I was in the situation where I was, 30 years ago with a small child and, married and 2 car payments and, thinking about potentially private school and insurance for a whole family, this might not have been a viable option for me at that time. By the time I was 53 and living on my own with no car payment and really no debt to speak of other than my house payment, it was a completely different scenario, and I was able to make that transition and make it work. Then Decor says, management of the sales team I was on changed. I trained what ended up being my 2 replacements. Been there. Office politics stinks. The most satisfying part of this job is what I do shows immediately. Right. This is, as I just said, you kind of get out what you put in. And if you put forth the effort and you do the listings and you do the right things, barring problems with the platforms, which has anybody been having problems with eBay this morning? Because I've been having fits with eBay. You are almost completely in control over your individual results, which is really nice. Brandon says, my friend who sells cars is about to sell his 100th car this year. Yeah, it can be, I was talking to a friend about it last night at dinner. It can be a super, super lucrative business. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of dead time waiting around for a potential customer. So again, it's certainly not for everyone. But yeah, it can be fantastic. I'm glad that I did it. And I'm glad, I know that I could go back and do that again if I needed to, like push comes to shove. I could go back and sell cars and make a living doing it. So if this totally blows up this year, I've proven to myself that that's a skill that I have and that I can go do. So it's nice to have something like that kind of in your back pocket. Mary asks when my birthday is. Mine is the 23rd. So whatever that is, 3 weeks from tomorrow. I believe that's right. When is yours, Mary? Then Decor says, and sells similar on sports card, was acting up, postal rates and tariff changes. I'm sure eBay will be glitch city. My problem has been, it's dropping business policies. I'm getting an error that says unable to pull business policies. So I get to list this item and I get a warning, an error that it can't access my business policies. Then I try it again and it works. So it's been a few extra button pushes this morning. Miss Lachey says, other than no sales since Monday night, no problems at all. Ouch. Sorry, that's rough. Again, not every day is our best day ever. There are days that are light. My postal guy that I drop my packages off to commented that I'm the only person that he knows as a reseller who's literally there every day. I've not, again, knock wood, 6 years now, full time. I've never had a day where I didn't sell anything. Part of that goes to the fact that I currently have over 12,000 listings. So I've got a bunch of at-bats, which makes a difference. Not every day is fantastic. I have those, I'll sell 5 $8 books and I'll have a $40 day and it's not fantastic. And then I'll have a day where, I'll sell 15 items and 2 of them are close to $100 or over $100 and you have a really good day. So it's, again, goes back to what I was talking about earlier, the inconsistency of it that can be really maddening. Mary McQuain on the 27th, we are close. Yeah, that's rough. And it can be very depressing. And again, you've got to have we talk about it here pretty regularly, kind of the strength to just bear with it, keep working your process. It's worked in the past. You know if you keep doing the right things that the business will come. It's just sometimes it's the vagaries of eBay. They're not showing your listings for whatever reason. So Media Picker says sales have been fairly steady, up 17%. Very nice. Miss Lachey, sure, I'll get something today. Subscription is due. Yeah, mine came out this morning. So that is always a big bite. So With that, if you have any other questions or comments in the chat, let me know. If you're a full-time reseller, pop in there in the chat and let me know how long you've been doing it full-time, or if you're thinking about going full-time. Let me go back here to one more chat before we get into this reselling news. Den Decor Depot says, started the year at 4,500 listings, hanging at 7,000 on eBay, 700 Etsy, and 3,000 on Mercari and Depop, up 45%. That's outstanding. That is a big, big number. I've talked about it before, like my listing flow is real close to in balance with my sales per week. So I'm only gaining maybe 10, 12 listings a week in terms of my total number. It has taken me the better part of the last over a year to get from like 11,800 to over 12,000, which is fine. I like that that's in equilibrium. But when you make that big of a boost in your listings, you would expect obviously that your sales would increase because you're putting more, assuming it's all good stuff at least, you're putting more stuff out in front of people. So Jeff Zenik, welcome. I am, for a guy that rode 570 odd miles on a bike last month, I am feeling refreshed. Again, when I decided I was not going to like stick myself to like a schedule for this channel, that has been very freeing for me. I would like to get back to being more regular. Obviously, last month I was spending a lot of time on the bike and, planning that out to get there. I'd like to get back to at least these lives being consistently once a week instead of every other week, but we'll see how that goes. But I am, thank you for noticing, I am feeling quite fresh. Thank you. So let's talk about some reselling news here.
News updates.
So there are a handful of things that I wanted to go over. One, we talked about a couple of weeks ago in the live session, maybe it was a month ago, eBay had rolled out their cost of goods sold feature so that you could input your cost of goods sold. I did a whole video on whether or not I thought that was a good idea. You may recall that my thought was that it might not necessarily be a good idea. Regardless, they've had to turn it off because they've had problems with it. They had tried this once before, several years ago, also had issues with it and put it on the back bench. They rolled it out about a month ago and have since had to stop it again. Sellers cheered at eBay Open when the cost of goods sold feature was announced, but a month later they're forced, again facing an embarrassing premature launch failure as they're forced to roll back this frequently requested seller tool due to a system error. More information about the feature had been revealed in the eBay Open sessions, including that it initially will only work for single item listings, though those could be multiple quantity. It's not available for listings with multiple variations, and it only supports what they call weighted average cost accounting model, which is what I use, so I could get away with this, and does not allow for other methods like first in, first out, or any of the other kind of standard accounting practices. So there were some limitations on it, but by and large, even the feedback I got on the video that I did was that a lot of sellers were very supportive of this feature and wanting this feature as part of their program. A month after that initial announcement, eBay started finally to provide access to that feature to some sellers as part of a phased rollout. Things quickly hit a snag when sellers reported seeing cost fields in offers and order details filled in with random numbers that they did not select and which did not, of course, then accurately reflect their cost of goods sold. Many sellers reported a couple of weeks ago that the cost of their items was showing as a flat $3, which seemed like it might be a default test amount or test data, but others saw larger and more random amounts, like a seller who said an acquisition cost of $39.99 was shown in the order details for an item that they sold. Alarmingly, this article over on Value Added Resource said the seller, when they contacted eBay, were told that that cost information was picked up because they did a sell one like this from another seller's listing. And if that is true, this article points out, it's absolutely unacceptable that eBay would potentially expose sensitive proprietary seller information to competing sellers by using sell similar as a workaround. So long story short, seller went in, found an item like the one he had, selected sell similar, and that pulled that original seller's cost of goods sold item information into the new seller's Item details, no good. The community team did post an update last week confirming that these erroneous cost figures were shown due to a system error, and eBay has temporarily rolled back and removed access to the feature as a result. So if you were excited about that feature and were using it, let me know in the chat what you think about the fact that it has been plagued with errors. Another thing they rolled out that they did talk about at eBay Open for parts are not working categories. They announced that they were going to offer some protections for that. That is now also rolling out live. In one presentation at the Seller Conference, Senior Director of Trust David Newman said, starting in October, they will have sellers' backs for parts not working returns with final sales, blocking remorse return reasons, a 3-day limit on item not described returns request, and that buyers would have to provide detailed pictures to prove, wrong button, that an item was not as described. So they would have to show a picture of whatever the damage was or the problem was, and apparently eBay would then match that up against the photos that you had in your listing to determine if it was actually an item not as described. While it's not entirely clear if these updates have been fully rolled out ahead of schedule, sellers have started to notice changes with the View Item page experience calling buyer attention to that for parts not working condition and the applicable return policies. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see on the screen there is a section where it says seller does not accept returns and that the condition is for parts are not working, and that is between the price and the buy it now. So it's being displayed relatively prominently, though to be fair, we know how people are about reading all the details, which eBay apparently is also aware of because they have taken the additional step of also triggering a pop-up message when the buyer clicks either add to cart or buy it now, which requires an additional click from the buyer to complete the action, which says this item is for parts or not working, returns are not accepted. If there's an issue with the item that was not previously disclosed in the item description, you can report that issue within 3 days of delivery. So they're prompting potential buyers that, hey, this thing is not returnable unless it is not as described, and it is being described as for parts are not working, and you need to be aware of that and acknowledge that. Again, whether buyers will actually read that and act on it will be another matter. The next step will, of course, be to see how well eBay does in executing those changes with the return process and how strictly they will enforce the requirement for the buyer to show images that, quote unquote, clearly contradict the listing, and if sellers will be able to appeal if they don't agree with eBay's judgment. Now, this is all just rolling out in the last couple of days, so if you've had any experience with it already, let us know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching on Team Replay. I don't get any returns really to speak of, so this probably won't be an issue for me, but it will also be interesting to see how eBay handles new high-tech ways buyers may try to circumvent this policy, as sellers are increasingly reporting experiencing or being concerned about the possibility that buyers may use AI to create images of their item showing fake defects. Sellers in the eBay UK community forum also recently discussed this potential problem after seeing it brought up on an Amazon forum. So again, I don't know what the answer is. You know, eBay clearly seems like they're doing the right thing here by requiring pictures. I'm not sure how many buyers who are trying to defraud a seller or get a return they're not entitled to will go to the trouble of generating a fake AI picture of the item with some kind of defect. I'm sure some will. I don't know what the percentage will be. You can't eliminate all bad actors, unfortunately, but it will be real interesting to see how that works out. Let me hop back over here into the chat if I can get my mouse to work. Try to get caught up a little bit here. Then Decor Depot says, more concerned about what I clear per day versus how much I list playing the volume game. Yeah, it is. You know, I track mine on a per item. I try to list between 120 and 150 items every week. And because of the volume that I'm doing, I kind of let the dollars sort themselves out. But I know a lot of sellers that specifically target a daily dollar amount that they want to list in order to have some level of confidence that they'll be able to hit their goals. Media picker, always planning on going full time, but going to pay off the mortgage first. Way less risk that way. Right. Having, again, like I said, for my situation, it wasn't having the mortgage paid off, but I wasn't really carrying any other debt. So setting yourself up in the best financial position to make that transition as easy as possible is definitely the way to go. Big Dre says full-time reselling plan B. Whether I get terminated or retire, I have no plans of applying for another job. This will be my last regular job. Absolutely. Miss Lachey, credit to Media Picker. Smart move. Yeah, that's terrific. Dentacor says there's no way I'm giving eBay or any platform my cost of goods sold info. Right. No. And especially, we talked about it at the time that, it gives eBay a lot of information, a lot of data about what in aggregate sellers are paying for particular types of items, which could then impact what eBay decides they want to do in terms of charging fees on either those items, those brands, or those specific categories. Even in my wildest dreams, I never would have imagined that they would have exposed your cost of goods sold data to me because I chose to use Sell Similar. That is frankly mind-blowing. Dentacor says partially because I have no idea what mine is. If I do an estate clean out, I'm not counting every single piece. The other part is if it's out there, it's fair game to everyone. Now see, I am the kind of person, I do count every piece. So when I did that big, whatever ended up being 10,000 book lot, as the seller and I were packing the boxes, we literally counted every item that went into a box and then put a count on the box. And then I tallied those up to determine how much I was going to pay them because we had agreed on a fixed price per book. And then I could use that as my cost of goods sold for accounting. So I am one of those that counts every single item and then accounts for, items that I get that are damaged, that I need to write out of inventory and that kind of stuff. I'm pretty meticulous with that in terms of my personal accounting. Again, no right way or wrong way to do it. Everybody's business is a little bit different, but I do actually go to the trouble of counting all that stuff. Miss Lachey, is there any more in the garage? Oh yeah. My postman actually asked that the other day too, and I'm within visual distance of potentially being able to get my vehicle back in that side of the garage. I've got one row now that I've reached the back wall. So I'm getting close to having one side of the garage, which was about 75% full. It's probably down to about 15% full. The other side is still completely full, but I've put a pretty good dent in it so far. So I'm pretty stoked about the amount of room I've been able to clear out just in time for things to start to get a little cold. Let's go back here to some more reselling news. Next up, this is great news. We talked about there's an incoming temporary holiday surcharge, and we had talked about that when that ends, usually is the time that USPS instates their new January price increase. They have promised no rate increase for market dominant products in January of this year. They've announced there will be no shipping rate increase for stamps and other market dominant products in early 2026 amid pricing pressures and calls to abandon the Delivering for America plan. We talked about that a little bit previously too. I don't work there. I'm not a C-suite level person. I feel like they're almost too deep in to abandon that plan now. Whether they have to carry it through 100% to completion in the way that it's been laid out over the next, whatever it is, 5 or 6 years, that might be a matter of some debate. But that ship has sailed, facilities have been closed, equipment has been scrapped. That's very difficult to undo. But the pricing structure is certainly something that will be helpful for sellers who have been squawking every 6 months about these price increases. According to a press release last week, Postmaster General David Steiner is recommending to forego that usual January rate increase for market dominant offerings, which are postal products for which they have no close private sector alternative, which include first class mail, marketing mail, and media mail. So that is really, really great news. Obviously, no idea what's going to go on in July. There is a bill currently going through Congress that would limit the post office to 1 increase per year. We'll see how that fares as well. But this is good news for us come January. Mercari made some interesting changes and updates over the last month. A handful of things that I think sellers will be largely pleased with. Time-limited sales. Bring urgencies to listings with a time-limited sale. Just select a listing, tap promote. Time-limited sale, choose your discount. That 72-hour sale starts right away, plus gets these perks, deals, page feature with a red timer badge, boosted in search results, and notifications sent to potential buyers. When the sale ends, your item automatically returns to its original price. I think Ms. Lachey may have been mentioning this on the last video, but this is a really nice feature that Mercari has introduced to allow you to target a particular item that you would like to put on sale for a limited time. They also have recently added auto offer to likers. You can send automatic individual offers to new likers. Just send an offer to likers as usual, and they will automatically send offers to all future likers. I know a lot of sellers were not particularly thrilled with that. They want to be able to determine whether they want to continue to send offers on those items. Like eBay gives you the option to do or not do that. Mercari says that's it. If a new liker accepts the offer, the sale is binding. No more delays or lowering your historic price, just faster targeted offers to help you sell more. If the seller reduces their price by 10% or more, Mercari will notify up to 50 of the most recent likers of that item, starting with the most recent to the oldest. It remains valid for 24 hours. If a liker accepts that reduced price, again, the purchase is binding. If no sale is made, in order to send a new offer to likers on the item, the new price, again, will still need to be at least 10% lower than the historically lower price. So they've not gotten rid of that. So if you send an offer out, the next offer you send has to be 10% lower than your last lowest offer price, not your current listed price. Not a fan of that. David Lee, if you're listening. We talked about that when he was on the show, whatever it was, a year and a half ago now. And that is still the case over there. And I do not like that. I want to be able to make offers off of my actual current full listed price, not anything I may have made an offer to someone on in the past. They also have made an adjustment to bundle shipping. They'll now calculate bundle shipping based on the weight of each item in the order, giving you and buyers more accurate rates. Of course, that assumes that you're using their shipping, number one, and that you're putting in, again, accurate size and weight information into each and every listing. I do ship on my own, so this doesn't really apply to me. I just kind of add that price in. When a customer makes a bundle offer to me, I do think about how much I'm going to save on shipping before I decide to accept the offer or do a counter offer. Normally, if I've got someone watching something on eBay, I might offer 10 or 15%. Someone makes me an offer on Mercari, that 10 or 15% number is kind of my starting place. And then I think about, okay, I've got 2 or 3 items here that I'm also going to save an extra couple of bucks on shipping. And I'll kind of factor that into my internal dialogue about whether or not I'm going to accept or counter that offer. So if you're a Mercari seller, these are kind of interesting features. Still really slow over there for me, but it is what it is. Last thing in the news this week, agentic commerce race is on. OpenAI instant checkout for Etsy and Shopify. Google is partnering with Poshmark for a feature. So I'm not going to go into a ton of depth on this, but there are some really interesting things here. Etsy in particular got a big PR and stock boost when they announced that they were partnering with OpenAI for this program. They've launched instant checkout for ChatGPT, powered by their what they call agentic commerce protocol to enable shopping and checkout from within conversations for a quote-unquote small fee. It's not clear what the size of the fee is or who is being charged said fee. I assume it is not the buyer. It will be, I assume it's going to be the platform, and then it'll be up to the platform whether they pass that fee on down. But the idea is meet your customers where they are, convert chats into sales. People already come into ChatGPT for product ideas. Now you can capture that demand at the source. You can get discovered organically. Those results in ChatGPT are ranked by relevance. Merchants appear when their products match a shopper's query. It's free to be discovered, and you only pay a small fee when the purchase is made. and stay in control of your systems and customer relationships. Instant checkout, they say, is designed to connect, not disintermediate. You remain the merchant of record with full control over your orders, which of course are going to ultimately be processed on the platform where the item is listed, in this case, Etsy. There was one expert who was not particularly impressed. Etsy, for their part, is thrilled with this, as they probably should be. They said it builds on work Etsy has done throughout the year to harness the power of large language models. They have talked about their forays into AI at some length over the last year. As a marketplace of over 5 million creative entrepreneurs, it's our job to remove barriers for shoppers so they can easily discover and be delighted by our sellers' special items. To further these efforts, they're partnering with OpenAI to meet shoppers where they are in their discovery journey. Both them and OpenAI using kind of the same language there. Starting today, ChatGPT users in the US can discover, browse, and purchase items on Etsy directly through ChatGPT, so they don't have to leave their chat client to make a purchase. When users enter a shopping-related query, like help me find a ceramic plate set, ChatGPT may show results from Etsy. From those results, users can click into the listing to learn more and even complete their purchase from Etsy via credit card, Apple, or Google Pay, or other payment methods, all without having to leave ChatGPT. So this is not like a redirect. This all is going to occur within ChatGPT. Through the integration, we're creating a new way to unlock the treasure chest of our sellers' unique, handcrafted, and handpicked items to an expanded audience of buyers. So again, they got a nice bump. Eric Seifert, an analyst at Mobile Dev Memo, however, expressed skepticism in a post on X, saying that instant checkout in chat isn't really agentic commerce, but is instead simply an in-app checkout experience similar to the native checkout that Meta recently announced that they're phasing out altogether. So there you go. Interesting. Obviously, Etsy is very pleased with that idea. I know I've got some viewers who are Chat GPT users. Let me know if you're here today in the chat what you think of this. Is that something that you would use? Is it something that you find interesting or intriguing? Anything to reduce barriers to people making purchases, I'm all about. If this is one of those and it works, great. Obviously, if you've been playing along for very long, you know I'm not necessarily huge on AI. The results have been very mixed in the applications that most of the platforms have tried to use so far. So it'll be interesting to see how this one actually works out. Mary McQuain says, I did try that on Mercari, want to do it more consistently. Auto offers has done nothing for me. I don't think I have ever made a sale on Mercari through a sent offer. I've made sales through receiving offers, but offers I've sent out, I could be mistaken, but I don't recall ever having made a sale that way. The bundle shipping price definitely went up. I bet they were losing money based on rates I saw when I sold the bundle. Yeah, you know, the shipping thing, it's, again, to go back to like new resellers, it's the bane of a new reseller's existence. Shipping is hard. Dimensional weight, sizes, weights, different carriers, the post office, is it ground advantage, is it priority, does it qualify for media mail, should I send it FedEx, UPS? I mean, it's a lot to get your head around, and even the platforms occasionally seem to struggle with getting it right. Ms. Lachey says, I've gotten a few bundle sales on Mercari. I've had a few bundle sales. I've had a couple just crazy, ridiculous offers. I had one last week. The potential buyer, and I'm going to use buyer in inverted commas, made me an offer on like $325 worth of books. Their offer was $65. If that laugh and that face could have been sent as a message on Mercari, that would have been the response that they got. I did make them a counter offer that was fairly reasonable and fairly aggressive given the amount of shipping that was going to be saved, because it was a pretty substantial number of items. But we were nowhere close. Mary says, I love those sales. Yeah, I love bundle sales, be they on Mercari or eBay. It's amazing to me, not to get off on too much of a tangent, how many people on eBay don't use their shopping cart. I'll have 2 or 3 orders from the same buyer, and they're all individual orders, individual transactions. But I really like when people do use their shopping cart and make a big purchase on eBay, 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 items. Those are, again, for someone who's a volume seller that has a lot of stuff that's occasionally super cheap. You know, I had somebody the other day that ordered like 8 $4 books. That ends up being a $30-odd sale. It's not significantly more time to pull that many books. I'm already in the warehouse anyway. So those kind of things actually work to my benefit. So I love that kind of stuff. Mary says, have you noticed these platforms use the word delighted a lot? Yes, the language, you know, the corporate PR speak that we've talked about previously. It's one of the reasons I got out of corporate retail. It's disingenuous. I just don't like that kind of language. I mean, I get the sentiment behind it, but it just sounds fake and phony to me. But Ms. Lachey says, Mary McQueen, it's great. Now adding verbiage to my listing to encourage bundling. And I have on eBay in particular, combined shipping automatically set up. It even says on my listing that on all my listings, because it's automated, combined shipping available or whatever their verbiage is. And I almost every week have multiple people that will reach out and say, do you do combined shipping? And I'm like, yes, just add everything to your cart and eBay will automatically correct the shipping to what the right amount is, and you can just make your purchase. There'll be no having to go back later and do a refund. It's nice and simple. But again, to go back to what we talked about earlier about buyers not always reading the information that is provided to them by the platforms. Great idea to add that verbiage to your listings. It absolutely is. Again, given the caveat that a lot of buyers don't read that level of detail, but it's better to have it in there than not, especially if you use like a default, you know, copy and paste verbiage in your product descriptions. Obviously better to have it there than not. And those people who do actually take the time to read that stuff will know that that's there and saves you some time and hassle. Then Decor says ChatGPT is the future of selling, but it's likely trigger the Etsy offsite 15%. I would assume that is probably correct. That'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we probably won't have any way to know unless we get charged a surcharge of like a ChatGPT fee on top of all the other fees that we're already paying. But I would assume that that would be considered an offsite because it is somewhere else, even though it's not ChatGPT. I don't know if it's actually considered to be a website, but I would assume they would treat it that way. Then Decor says, on my Ground Advantage supplies I ordered through Posh are on the way. I'm going to talk to my post office to see if they can order them. Let us know what you find out about that, because again, I see a lot of sellers talking about this packaging, and at least the initial announcement was that you had to be a Poshmark seller and you had to provide your seller information to the post office in order to even order these supplies. I would be curious to know, can your local post office order them for you just generically without a Poshmark account? Or will they take your Poshmark information, or will they just not do it and say, no, you've got to do that through whatever the online servicer is for that stuff? It'd be really curious to see how that packaging finds its way into other platforms sold. If people are using those boxes for things other than Poshmark, they're not branded Poshmark. From the images that I've seen, there's nothing on them that would indicate that they can only be used for that. That's going to be interesting. If you could get, I don't use a ton of boxes. I use mostly poly mailers. But if you're someone who uses a lot of ground advantage and you use a lot of boxes, and those are ultimately going to be able to be ordered like the old priority boxes, essentially unlimited amounts for free, that is a potential huge cost savings, because shipping supplies are expensive and getting more so. Cardboard boxes, new shipping boxes can be, you know, I've got one size a box. They're almost $1 a piece, even at the cheapest I can find them. So that would be a terrific savings if that ends up being the case, that you can get those and get them for free and use them for anything. Was the offer for all of your best items? No, it wasn't. I mean, it was just a random assortment of old, like, vintage books. They were all in a similar theme. Older, kind of not quite antique era books. It would have been a really terrific lot, but not for what amounted to like 80+% off. No, I can be pretty aggressive with my discounts on older items, but that's a big number. Mary says, Den Decor Depot, I've sent 3 emails, I've received 2 confirmations, no follow-up saying the order is in process. Glad someone is getting them. I assume you're talking about the Ground Advantage packaging. We may have talked about that a couple of weeks ago, that process appeared to be a little fraught with peril, people getting cut off and hung up on and yada yada, but growing pains. Den Decor says it took 2 weeks to get an order confirmation. They do have poly mailers. That's good to know. And I ordered them. Tariffs are killing packaging. Yes, I just did a big order really before the tariffs kicked in. So I haven't looked. I think I have enough to get through Q4. So we'll see. But yeah, I know packaging companies have been talking about the fact that their costs are going through the roof. And obviously end users of that packaging has said the same. So if the post office is going to be able to provide those at no charge, which given that they're losing billions of dollars a quarter, I don't know how they can afford to do that. I guess the idea is you give away the packaging for free and people use your service instead of using UPS or FedEx, that you then claw that back on the back end. But that's a big expense. Ms. Lachey says, I can't see unlimited supply boxes for free for all lasting for very long. Yeah, as we were just chatting about, it's a huge investment on their part. And again, the logistics of it, a lot of us don't keep a ton of supplies on hand. You don't have the space for it. So, if it ends up, it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to get your stuff. That's problematic. You got to go out and pay full price now to get packages just so you can continue to operate your business. Do they cap you? Can you only order 50 at a time? Can you only place so many orders a month or per quarter? I think there's a lot yet to come on that process, but it's cool that they're offering it. I don't know if the idea came from Poshmark originally and they went to the Postal Service, or if the Postal Service went to Poshmark and said, hey, we have an opportunity here to maybe come up with some packaging that will help save your buyers and sellers some money. Here's these boxes. Would you use them? I don't know how that all got started. If anybody does know, let us know in the chat or in the comments. But it's a really interesting program. Mary says, I need to learn the whole patience thing. Yes, and that is to go full circle back to, full-time reselling or just reselling in general. Patience is a virtue even in this business. Especially if you're doing like media sales like I am, a lot of long tail. I sell stuff, I talk about it all the time. I sell stuff that I've had in my inventory for a year, 2 years, 4 years. And some of it still brings really good money. I sold a book the other day that'll be in an upcoming episode from a What Sold recap that I had listed for like $1.25, $125, kind of held out. It went into one of my clearance sales and finally sold for like $80. I'll take that. And it was worth probably waiting a year to try to get the bigger number out of it. But being willing to, again, it's 2 different philosophies, no right or wrong answer. I'm slow dime. A lot of other people are fast nickel. Neither one is wrong. Neither one is right. They're just different ways to get to the same end result. Then Decor says the priority packaging misuse is huge already. I think priority is going the way of the dodo. I think they'll always have it, but I would not be surprised if they don't get rid of that packaging, or at least the free, or put some more limits on, again, how much you can order. Because yes, I mean, I've seen priority bubble mailers used as packing in a box. Yeah. The amount of postal fraud is probably a stretch of the term, but the amount of stuff that gets sent via media mail that does not qualify is probably costing the post office hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, I would have to think. We talked about before, I got a hat once in a media mail with a media mail label on the package. And I think that's why you've seen so much convergence on the price. Media mail inching up closer to where the ground advantage prices have been historically. So they need to get it obviously under control. Ms. Lachey, the real question is, how long will it take for someone to have these for sale on eBay, like the UPS labels? Yes. Government property, so it will be taken down. That it should be, probably. But there are any number of things that most of us as sellers have probably experienced receiving a takedown notice from eBay about an item for whatever reason, Vero or whatever, and then you go on eBay and you look for that exact same item, and there are dozens, if not hundreds of them from other sellers, the exact same item, exact same, brand name and description of the product in the title, that are still there and have not been taken down. So the enforcement of those kind of things is pretty hit or miss. It goes back to the topic I harp on with some regularity. eBay introducing all these kind of new features where there's some basic functionality even within things like, policy enforcement that they're not really very good at. So a soapbox I won't get back on today. Den Decor says the biggest fraud our post office is seeing is those pop-up shops on like TikTok and Facebook. They're all shipping with counterfeit labels, and there are a lot of people having to pay retail rates. Interesting. TikTok. I haven't posted on TikTok in forever. They keep blowing me up wanting to sell on TikTok shops, and it's just not something I'm interested in doing. But Lord Jake Ryan says, saw a neighbor kid order 10 boxes of priority envelopes and 5 boxes of priority mail boxes. Saw them in the dumpster later. Don't think he knew what he was doing. Yeah, again, just the waste of those. It's one of those arguments. People talk about offering things for free, and that is for some people it can almost be a disincentive for them to actually then use those items because they don't have any skin in the game. Where if those boxes, if you had to pay just a modest fee, if you had to pay just to have those shipped to you, would you just willy-nilly order 50 boxes if you knew it was going to cost you $10 to get them shipped to you? You would be a little more, at least in theory, a little more cognizant about, yes, I really need these. Yes, I will really use these because I'm going to have to pay some small token amount for them, rather than just having them provided for free. Free sounds good on the surface, and strictly as a consumer of something that's free, the pricing obviously is fantastic because it doesn't cost you anything. But it does create some unintended consequences where people are not incentivized then to really care about whether they use those things or whether they use those things properly, because they don't have any skin in the game. You can let me know what you think of that in the chat or the comments down below. If you're on Team Replay, we are at the 1 hour mark. If you have anything else you would like to discuss, let me know in the chat. Speak now or forever hold your peace. As always, thank you to everyone who came out today and participated. I always appreciate you guys coming by and spending a little time here, especially as we start ramping up for Q4. I know people have stuff to do. Yeah, hey, if you haven't hit that thumbs up button yet and you got something out of this, please do that. If you're new here and just stumbling on this for the first time, this is the kind of content that you like, do me a favor and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're any kind of a cyclist or you just like watching sometimes videos, just me cycling out in nature. Some of them I do a lot of Zwift racing. There's videos of that too. But if you're into that sort of thing, I do have another channel, Cycling with Ryan. You can check out my cycling videos. That would be awesome. Just got my 60th subscriber over there, which again, in the scheme of things is a nothing burger, but the channel's only been out for a couple of months. I feel pretty good about 60. So Mary says, I had a bunch of priority boxes and envelopes, but I brought them all back to the post office when Posh stopped using them. Can't see throwing them away. Yes, Absolutely. And they will eventually use those. I know they had made some changes to the boxes. I don't know, what was that, year and a half ago? And there were a bunch of old boxes that they probably discarded. But yeah, if you've got some that you'll no longer use, take them back. Don't use them as padding. Don't use them illegally for something they're not intended for. Miss Lachey, thank you. Thank you, as always. I appreciate it. Beard King Picker, thank you. Have a good day as well. I do have another ride on tap today. Just a workout ride today, so nothing too crazy, but I'm going to ease my way into October. I don't know if it'll be a 500-mile month for me. I've done 3 or 4 of those in a row now. Just crossed 4,000 miles for the year on the bikes, I guess, as it were. So my legs are ready for a little bit of a break. Mary, thank you. Thank you as always. Thank you for sharing this as well on Instagram, along with all the other lives that are happening today. Again, as always, thank you so much for coming out. Until next time, my friends, it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.